When I lived in London, I remember my staff saying to me, every December, are you going home for Christmas? And I used to look at them and say, I am home. There are no away games.
Welcome to Winning the Away Game. Today, we are joined by Brett Belinsky, a South African-born media, technology, telecommunications and entertainment executive whose career has crossed Johannesburg, Melbourne, Sydney, Hong Kong, London, and Los Angeles. Brett co-founded Global Access Telecommunications in South Africa in the late 1990s and moved through major global roles at Akiva, Encompass Digital Media, Deluxe Entertainment, NBC Universal, and now advisory work across venture capital, private equity, family offices, media, and telecoms clients. He has chaired the World Teleport Association, served on several boards, and spent much of his career working on the less visible infrastructure that gets content, signal, and strategy from one place to another. Today, we want to talk about building across borders, what it means to be useful inside industries that keep changing, and how South African operators learn to win in very big rooms far away from home. Brett, welcome to Winning the Away Game.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Flip, how are you doing?
Yeah, Justinus, I'm great. Thank you very much. I almost thought you forgot about me. I'm here as well. Brett, such a privilege to have you on the show. I believe you're in sunny California.
That's correct. Actually, Central California, on the coast between San Francisco and Los Angeles.
It's the worst places in the world to be. So, Brett, we have a little tradition on the show where we ask our guests to share with us their favorite Springbok moment. One little caveat, you're not allowed to say Joel Strunsky in a 95 dropkick.
Okay. So I actually have two favorite moments. The first was post the 1995 World Cup. I was invited to a breakfast session hosted by Morné du Plessis. And in the Q&A section, they asked him, how did you feel, when you knew that you had achieved the impossible? And he said, I'd never felt so sad in my life. And everybody went, what? And he said he knew at that moment that he would never feel that emotion again. So that's my first favorite thing I remember about 1995. Second thing is I moved to the UK. I was invited to a match at Twickenham. I was being hosted by people I didn't know. They were all South Africans. They all took bets on the game. I was the only one who bet on the Bokke. There were 40,000 South Africans in that stadium. It was cold. It was wet. I think the stadium holds just over 82,000. They got into the anthems. There was a guy dressed as a Zulu warrior in the stands. It was freezing. And the crowd sang with the most unbelievable gusto and passion. And I remember tears streaming down my face because I knew I had moved. I was now at an away game, so to speak. And South Africa won 42-6 that day. It was very special, 2008. And I remember everyone paying me. When we went back to drinks, a lot of very frustrated British people. And I remember having a hangover the next day. It's true.
There's nothing quite as good, Brett, as this when you are in a foreign country, no matter where you are as a South African, when the Springboks win. I had this particular situation in 2023, when the Springboks won the World Cup at the quarterfinal. So living in France, and on the Monday after, the Tuesday after the quarterfinal, I played golf, local golf day at a golf club. And so, it's a random 4-ball teaming up. We greet each other on the first hole, we tee off. At the start of the second hole, one of my 4-ball partners said, he's sorry, but he can't continue to play with me. It was a French guy, obviously, being a little bit too disgusted about the loss against the French in the quarterfinals. But it was a sad day for him, but a very proud moment. It's the little wins. In winning the away game, we take them all. Talking of which, Brett, you are such a proud South African. You started your own Biltong brand in California. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So actually, when I still lived in Los Angeles, there were a couple of us who were pretty what's the word? Disappointed with what you could get in terms of Biltong. You can get Biltong. There are 30 companies plus that make Biltong, but I don't know if you've ever pulled into an NGen one-stop shop in the middle of nowhere in South Africa, and they've got packets of Biltong that have been hanging there for at least 3 to 6 months. That's what you can get when you order Biltong in America. And I just felt that they weren't doing it any justice. And I have this thing that, when I think of Biltong, you walk into a Van Rensburg's in George or a Rembrandt's in London, and you pick your piece of Biltong, they slice it for you, they put it in a brown paper bag, and by the time you walk out the shop, you've eaten half the bag. Now, that's to me how Biltong's supposed to be eaten. It's got to be fresh. So I created a business that makes fresh-to-order Biltong. And you can choose whether you want it sliced, you want sticks, you want chunks. You can order a slab, and you can cut it yourself. You can choose if you want it met-vet or sonnevet. You can choose whether you want it semi-dry or wet. So it's almost like a custom ordering system. And anyway, cut a long story short, I said to the guys, listen, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I don't like sitting around. And the guy said, yeah, no, don't worry. And so I did it. And then when I did the capital call, everybody had to send their money, and nobody was able to send the money. We'll do it next month, whatever. So what started off as a 5-man partnership is now a sole proprietorship. And the business is called Tongg, Tongg. And we now ship to 48 states. For whatever reason, no one in Hawaii and no one in Alaska has that.
No South Africans there.
Yeah.
That could be the case. But interesting, my focus is not just about looking after the diaspora of South Africans, and there's about 150,000 in the US, I think. It's really about looking after the Americans. And once an American has tasted Biltong, they will never eat beef jerky. Never. And so that's the mission. And I would say over 50% of the business now is Americans. People have never.
That's awesome.
Never been to South Africa. They don't know South Africa. People know about South Africa, as you guys will know. It's fairly topical out there, but they certainly don't know about the traditions of, for example, Biltong and Druivorst. It's just not something they know.
Yeah, there's definitely something to say in the way South Africans handle them, and like, I don't know if impose our own traditions on foreigners, but wherever we go, I invite my neighbors over for a braai, explain them this. Yesterday we were friends with a braai, and to explain them how it actually works. It's about the keier around the fire, and then we eat together. Maybe a little later, but and the Biltong. And you're saying, well, you're focusing on the Americans, changing them one by one. What is it? What is it from South Africans that makes us, so proud of our traditions that we take it to everyone else?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're a son of the soil, and you can't take that away. It's you may be disgruntled you may be heart sore about having to leave your home and move somewhere else, but at the end of the day, you're a son of the soil, and you never lose the taste of certain things. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's watching a game on TV that's in the middle of the night, or if you smell a babooty by chance, and it's not supposed to be babooty, but you smell it, or you eat a piece of really good biltong. You just never forget that. And what's quite interesting is a lot of guys will tell me it's the best biltong they've ever had, but I know in my heart of hearts they just haven't had biltong for a while. And I'm very good at never ever bullshitting myself. I take whatever compliments I can, but you've got to stay grounded here. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's important though. It's because you're the only person who can cash that check. You can't kid yourself.
But I mean, that's such an interesting dilemma, because that not bullshitting yourself becomes even more important when you change context and you start playing the away game, right? Because now you're in a completely different environment and you need to be like brutally honest with yourself around what's happening around you. How did that awareness evolve as you crisscross the globe? I mean, you've been basically almost on every continent. How did that gut or that ability evolve over the last 30 years as you crisscross the globe?
Yeah, it's I think of it like this, and we all think of it differently, but when you do make that massive step to move, and you've both done it, that it's a serious thing that you're doing. But unless you make that step mentally and accept that you're starting again, there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, it's going to be up and down. Unless you do that, you're just going to torture yourself and your family potentially. When I lived in London, I remember my staff saying to me every December, "Are you going home for Christmas?" And I used to look at them and say, "I am home. This is home." And it's actually part of my personal philosophy is that, there are no away games. There are only home games. And if you think of rugby as a bellwether of the emotions in South Africa, there used to be panic when the Bokke used to fly to New Zealand. Most of the guys have never been on a plane before. I'm being unkind when I say that, but you know what I'm saying. Now you have a force of nature that arrives in Auckland and has the mindset to win. They don't go there thinking they're on the back foot, they're at a disadvantage. They assume they're going to win. And that's kind of how I've looked at it. There are no away games anymore for me. Whether it's in Australia, New Zealand, Europe, or in the US, no matter where you go, we're at home. And you've got to make that mental transition in your brain. I really believe that.
Brett, I love that philosophy. I just love that, win no matter what, burn the ships, or what. There's so many expressions for that. Tell us a little bit more about Brett. Where did you grow up? What happened? How did you end up developing this philosophy?
Well, just I was sent to Bloemfontein to boarding school, and if I went to Grey, I would have told you, Flip. But I went to a school, St. Andrews, in Bloem. I was from Johannesburg. We went on the train overnight. It was it was an amazing experience. And as a school, we punched way above our weight. We never played rugby in the sort of higher leagues. But in 1980, which is when I matriculated, we beat, and grey was the standard, as you all know. In fact, I think in 1980, the entire grey first rugby team made the Craven team, and 7 of those guys made SA schools. They were known as the best rugby school in the world. We never competed against grade rugby, but in 1980 we beat grey in every single other sport. We're talking about a school that had 100 boys from standard 6 to matric. So it kind of started there. There was this camaraderie that you did that at school because you were on the back foot. And then, when I went to the army, I did my 2 years military, and then I did 10 years at camps after that. You kind of learn that, survival depends on you. And I don't want to get too much into the military, but, the difference between the different forces around the world, what made the South African Army so good and so special was there was no plan B. If people went into a neighboring country, there was no "we're coming to fetch you with lots of airplanes to evacuate you." There was no plan B. You all knew you had to make it back, and there was a plan to get back in terms of how you went in. But that I've never forgotten that, and you just learn that you can't rely on some extra force. And I think I can't say all South Africans are like this, but it's something that I've seen so many times in different parts of the world. People just get on with it because you've moved. You now have a new set of rules around you, and you have to adapt. And you have to adapt quickly. The one thing I'm pretty good at is I'm good at reinvention. It's hard to do. There's a whole story, people don't change, but you have to change. And, you actually have to mentally change. And it's hard to do. But the more I do it, the better I get at it. And I've done it enough times. So you realize that's kind of what you do. I remember when I left South Africa, I left under terrible circumstances. Everybody has a story. I had grown up with someone who was shot and killed in front of his kids. They were playing soccer in Balfour Park in the northern suburbs. And his kids were the first to find him. And he shot for his cell phone. And went to his funeral, and there were 5,000 people at his funeral. It doesn't sound like a lot. I'm guessing, but you guys have never been to a funeral of 5,000 people. No. It's fairly traumatic. And sadly, that tragedy was a catalyst for me. I knew I had to follow my heart, and it was the first time I'd been touched by violence. And I loved South Africa, and I didn't really want to move, but I knew I had to do the right thing. I had a family, I had to get going, and, that's what we had to do. It was tough. But, you've got to embrace it. It's part of change every day. And South Africans have had change, drastic change for years and years and years. And I think positively we'll continue to have change for years and years and years. Much more than you see in most countries. Places like Australia have never really changed. It's the same old. But we've seen massive change, positive and negative, but it continues to evolve, and I think that's a good thing.
So after that strategy, and you realized you wanted to go, what was the first move? What was the first place you ended up going from South Africa?
Well, I actually relocated to London, but I had been working all over the world as a consultant at the time. I'd sold my business in South Africa, and I promised that I wasn't going to go back into the television business. No, I'm not doing that again. And I was very lucky. I was asked to do a whole bunch of things all over the world, which is nice, and I enjoyed it. But I always used to come back on weekends generally. And then I made the decision. I was offered a fantastic opportunity to join the board of a company in London, a company called Arqiva. And we were part of a group. And in those days, we were doing £800 million of revenue, a private company. And it was a very prosperous business. And you have to make a very big switch in your brain. We're talking a sizable business, and I just had my way of doing things. It's uncomfortable for people, but if you're going to be effective, you have to make some very early decisions, and you have to take people along the road with you. It's leadership. You've got to show them very early wins that you know what you're talking about, and they follow you because they can see the results. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but you kind of know you've got to go. So I moved to London, and I became a British citizen. It takes a while. You've got to go through this whole formal process. And pretty soon after that, I was asked to go and lead a business in the US. And I'm now a US citizen. So I've still got my green number. It's forever in the safe. That was never my intention to do that, but it's just the way it's worked out.
And so what was it like, and maybe what was the differences to adapting to the UK and then adapting to the US? What was the biggest contrast that you saw between those two markets?
They're very different. People think there's a huge similarity between the UK and the US. There's actually a much bigger similarity between South Africa and the UK. I think it's South Africa's biggest trading partner. And obviously, when you've got, I think, 800,000 Saffers in the UK, I remember somebody telling me that there's 12 NG dominees in the greater London area. That's how big the congregation is. I was astounded to hear that. It's easy because, it's on the same time zone, relatively on the same time zone. I think it's exactly the same as France. So you adapt to the UK a lot easier for a whole bunch of, they speak English. They speak a different kind of English, but they speak English. But you adapt. You never get used to the weather. The weather is just a compromise from day one.
I wanted to ask you, what is the steadfastness in your head that keeps you going to all the terrible cold places?
Yeah, I know. It's when you're busy, you don't think about the weather because it's the environment you operate in, and you just adapt. You learn pretty quickly. You've got to buy proper shoes. You can't wear fancy leather soles. You've got to have rubberized shoes. You learn quickly. Otherwise, your feet freeze. You start buying proper clothes that will be warm wherever you go, and then you start getting used to the fact that it rains almost every day, and then you move to Central California like I am, and it rains 6 days a year. And so you celebrate the rain. You can smell the rain. It's fantastic. I grew up in Johannesburg. I remember the smell of those high-felt storms every evening. It was unbelievable. I still remember, and that's what it smells like now still. So rain is obviously an international sensory overload, and it smells the same wherever you go. In London, you didn't smell it because it's always raining. You never got a chance to let those factors come into play.
So culturally, you say you feel like the UK was closer to South Africa. So what was the biggest adjustment when you ended up in the States?
Well, there are lots of adjustments. Probably the first thing is you have to speak in a very pronounced way because they don't understand what you're saying. That's the first thing. I had to actually have a new driver's license done, which So when you move from South Africa to the UK, it's pretty easy. Both right-hand drive markets. They take your South African license away from you and they give you a British license. You don't write a test. You don't do any other thing. When I got to Los Angeles, I had to buy a car. You have to have an American license. You got to go have a license. And I've never been so scared in my entire life. And I don't know if you remember a James Bond movie called From Russia with Love, but there was this lady that had spikes in her shoes. And she would come up behind and kick somebody and sort of kill them with her shoes. That's the person who took my driver's test. And she failed me on about 7 different things. And she just tore the piece of paper and she said, here you are, never come back here. They're going to give you a license, never come back here. So that was a big adaptation. Learning to drive on the other side of the road. It was fairly easy, actually, to cross the pond from London because mentally I was fine. I was, I'd already left home. I had made up my mind I wanted to do something else. So it's the first move that's the hardest. But there's a lot of things they don't tell you. When I remember I bought a car, and I said to the guy at the P&A department, the parts and accessory department, just need a sticker. And the guy said, what? And I said, I just need a sticker.
They don't know what that is?
No. And he said, what? And I said,
a decal. Yeah.
And he said, for what? And I said, I've got to put the license on my windscreen. He said, oh, you mean a license disc holder? Now, interesting, here in the US, it's called a sticker. These are nuances that you learn over time. People talk about elevators versus lifts and trunks versus boots. You learn that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
One of the first things that I was told when I got here, I said, I now live in Los Angeles. And they said, no, it's Los Angeles. And you can always tell when somebody's not from here when they don't pronounce it properly. But it's like anywhere, I remember people talking about Bloemfontein. I say, no, it's Bloemfontein. There's no such thing as Bloemfontein.
Yeah. So Brett, having lived all over, experienced many things, what was your loneliest moment while abroad?
Yeah, to a certain extent, it's that lost in translation feel when when you realize that people don't see things the way you see them. It's mentally lonely. That lack of familiarity. I remember in things like in London getting invited to what they called a barbecue, and there are people burning chicken in the flames, no salt, no pepper. And you realize it's not a braai. But the most important thing to remember, it's up to you to communicate and to stay in touch, because you miss the people that sort of you've grown up with, and that you've broken bread with, that you've had a few beers with, that you played golf with. You miss that, but you realize it's up to you to communicate. You're the one who's left. You can't rely on your mates to stay in touch. You have to do no, that's my experience. I'm sure everybody's different, but you actually have to make the effort and check in with people. It's not that they forget about you, but you're not in their sphere of influence anymore. They know who you are, they know where you are, but they don't think of you the same way. Whereas when you're on your own and you're lonely, mentally, and maybe physically, you think back and you go, I wonder how he's doing. And, I know it's 16th of June or whatever the public holiday is. You go, I wonder what the guys are doing. And 9 times out of 10, they're braaiing, or they're playing golf, or they, skiing at the Vaal, or they're doing something that you can associate with. But I think if you just do the communication and you make that effort, it all comes together pretty quickly. You do get lonely. It's funny, Flip, in London, the weather used to sometimes get to me. But it only got to me when it would get to me on a weekend because I wasn't at the office. And I wanted to play golf. And, the guys wanted to play golf in driving rain was coming sideways. And as you know, there are no caddies. You've got to carry your own clubs. I wear glasses, so I've got to keep wiping my glasses. It was tough to play golf in the rain. I didn't like that. When you live in London, a lot of people come and visit you because you've got a place to stay. That runs a bit thin after a while. But people would say, "What can we bring you?" I said, "Can you bring me a big box of licorice, the Beacon licorice?
Oh yeah.
Or can you bring me some peppermint crisps?" But I've learned that you can't rely on that anymore. You can get those things here. There's stores that sell these things, but you've got to learn to eat the cereal that they sell here. You've got to learn to eat and to enjoy the products that they have here. A good example was, in London, I got to know wine pretty well. I used to think South Africa had the best wine in the world. When I got to California, I didn't even think the California wines would be that good. They are spectacular. And they win awards, and they are spectacular. And living here in the wine area, I drink a lot of wine, probably too much, but I do my bit for the economy. And you learn, you've just got to adapt. I don't buy foreign wines anymore. I buy California wines.
On your point about, it's when you live abroad, it's up to you to keep that contact with people everywhere. And I especially feel that with the networks, that
Yes.
You sort of know someone, and we've all built businesses in South Africa, and you grow up with people in certain areas. And you always feel you can rely on those people. And as South Africans are, whenever you call, they always pick up. They're always open for a chat. But if you don't entertain those relations, it becomes quite tricky. How have you managed to keep up networks? What's your go-to to build new networks wherever you go? I mean, you've lived all over the world.
Look, I'm lucky. And I really mean that I'm lucky. I meet someone, I try and memorize their name pretty quickly. I make a point of asking for their contact details. I stay in touch, obviously professionally. People use things like LinkedIn. You don't often meet South Africans every single day, but when you do, you make a point in them understanding that you understand we're both from the same place. And I make an effort and I communicate. And 9 times out of 10, it works out. And I've met the most amazing people that I didn't know back in South Africa. And I don't just focus on South Africans, funny enough. I want to meet everybody. But you've got to make the effort. And I'm lucky. I can communicate, and I use that to my advantage.
What's been the major things that kept you connected to South Africa? Obviously, Biltong is one thing. You even in the Biltong business. What was the other things that keeps you connected to South Africa?
It's a good question because I don't think I'm that connected anymore. I wish I was. But I read the newspaper every single day. A lot of my friends here in the US think I'm crazy. They say, like, well, what do you do that for? I said, because that's where I'm from. I want to know what's going on. You've got to stay in touch. If you're going to have an opinion, and I have a strong opinion about a lot of things, you've got to know what's going on. You've got to follow, got to read the room. And I read widely. And so I subscribe to, things like the Daily Maverick and various other newspapers. But I found that the run-of-the-mill press all over the world has fallen into the trap of having a rhetoric that suits the government of the day. And that's not good enough. You can't rely on that. Here in the US, news is pretty poor. You have a couple of cable news stations, and it's either very left or very right. There's no real unbiased news. I've discovered a few networks that seem to be getting there. In the UK, you had the BBC and you had Sky, completely different viewpoints on the same thing. Whether it was Tory versus Labour or whatever the situation was. But you've got to stay in touch. You've got to read. You can't just make up your mind as to what's really going on. There's a guy called Franz Cornier. I don't know if you know who he is. Just the most amazing guy. The way he sees things, and whatever he does, I listen to it because he shows me perspective that I never would have had. He'll talk about what he thinks might happen in the local elections or what he thinks might happen with the current controversy with Pala Pala. He'll give you a view that he's just very, very intuitive. And I need that sometimes just to bring balance to the way I'm seeing things. It's easy to go down a rat hole, right? And to be convinced that certain things are happening the way they're happening. It's not always like that.
And so what was the biggest thing that you can recall that he's made you see differently about South Africa?
It's the long game. And he looks at life as the long game. He's not looking at what's going to happen tomorrow morning, on a Tuesday morning. He's looking at what's likely to happen between now and 27, and then likely from now until maybe 2030. He takes a longer view, and that's what you've got to always do that in life. It's too easy to get swept up in the current situation. You've got to I think you have to take a longer view. And that's been a big learning for me. I've learned that over the years. I was very reactive in the early days. I would, get very upset with somebody, and that would be the end of that conversation. I don't do that anymore. I've got a more balanced view. I don't get emotionally charged with the situation. I look at it from their perspective. Why are they doing whatever they're doing? And in business, when I look at companies, I try not to fall into the whole sales frenzy that people fall into. I look at the facts, and I'll give an example. I looked at a business about a year ago, and I was asked by a venture capitalist, why not just sit in the room and listen to the pitch? And it was a group of people who had invented a system that could take a script, a television script, and would tell you how much money the TV script would make. And I remember after 15 minutes saying, you don't even have to pay me. This is nonsense. There's no such thing. It doesn't work like that. When you make a movie, you generally pray and hopefully people come and watch it. But no system can tell you how much money something's going to make. And that was the end of the conversation. Thank goodness, 99% of the time people listened to me and they abandoned that investment. They were going to put $500,000 into that company because they believe, wow, this is breakthrough. But it's not. You've got to remove yourself from the emotional sales process. It sounds easy. It sounds easy. But you've got to do that. You've got to be, and accountants are actually pretty good at that. I think they teach them that at university.
Or they're born skeptical.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's exactly what we're seeing in this whole new AI generation, isn't it?
Yes.
Anything you add AI to it, and all of a sudden it's a new product.
Yes. And listen, my industry, which is, I've sort of been in the media and entertainment industry for my whole life, pretty much. AI has had a massive impact. Everybody's in denial. That's what the last strike was about. But I've seen 30-second trailers of movies where every single part is AI, whether it be the music, whether it be the actress, whether it be the rain, whether it be the flames in the background. The entire piece of film is AI, and that's powerful. Now, obviously, a lot of people are threatened by that, but you've got to decide where you are, and it's happening big time. There's an enormous amount of disruption worldwide in multiple industries, but just that M&E industry, absolutely, disruption is profound.
Do you think the crowd is open enough to receive that type of what do you call it, content or imaging?
You as an audience would not know. It's that good. In fact, there's a lot of things that you see, you don't know that you're seeing AI. The people are the industry folk, the sort of doyens in the studios, the old school people. they're fighting it like crazy. Then they're not all fighting it. I'm generalizing, but the general feeling is that this is going to stop script writing. This is going to affect all sorts of things. The post-production business, which is where you finish a film or a TV series, is being absolutely swept up by AI. And you can embrace it or not. You have a decision. I can tell you the audience doesn't know the difference and won't know the difference. It gets better and better and better. I saw some baseball commentary. I didn't realize that the commentary was AI, and that it was taking all the data that was being produced during the game, and the machine learning was converting that into data that the voice that the voice was projecting, and it was 100% accurate. It was based on what was happening. So all of a sudden you say, well, do we need 3 or 4 commentators at every game? Because it all drives cost. I'm using that as a weird example, but it drives cost.
Well, it's going to be 100% unbiased, isn't it? They probably need that in France, maybe.
Yes.
But I mean, you spoke earlier about this ability to adapt to a change in circumstances and adapting to a world that's changing. And I mean, my feeling is that we're going to have such systemic and major change in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be fascinating to see how, and I mean, the media and entertainment is obviously one industry, but it's going to be almost across the board.
Yeah, it's going to be unrecognizable. I remember when we introduced internet banking in South Africa. I'm talking about 30 years ago. And I remember going, I've got to embrace this. And you make a choice whether you want to go and stand in a line, wait for the teller the number to flash up, and you go forward and you say, can I get the balance, or can I cash a check, or can I pay this person? It's a brave new world now. And that brave new world, Justinas, as you say, has been going on for a long time. The next 5 to 10 years is going to be dramatic. I really believe that. You're probably not going to have a mobile phone in 10 years' time. You're not going to carry a device. It's that dramatic. I know people don't understand that, but the world has changed. You're not going to have a cable subscription. You're going to have signals sent to you, to your home, to your motor car, to your vacation, that's based on what you like, what you used to, what you want to watch. One of my businesses that I'm invested in, we do in-flight entertainment. So here in the States, we do Delta, United, American, and JetBlue. Those are the 4 big airlines. We do all the in-flight entertainment and internet connectivity. Now, you watch a particular football team, and people are pretty passionate about American football like they are about rugby. It really is a big thing. And so if you're flying on a Sunday afternoon and your team is playing, you can have that game streamed to your seat. No one else is getting that game. You're paying $5 to have that game streamed to your seat. When you click on your iPad, it's custom for you. But the advertising is demographically profiled to you because it knows who you are. It knows you don't have any kids. It knows what motor car you drive. It knows when you do your shopping because they triangulate all the data. And that's a big thing. If you think of when you use Google and you Google something you're looking to buy, a fly fishing rod, for example, all of a sudden it starts showing you these fly fishing ads, right? Now that's how demographic profile advertising is going to work into the future. It's only going to serve ads that are applicable to you specifically. There's going to be no wastage, which is a big problem with advertising. No one knows who's watching what, and yet it costs so much money. So the world is going to change dramatically, and AI is going to lead a lot of that. There's a lot of other forces that are driving that, but this sort of universe of one, I think, is going to become a big thing. Technology is going to become very obsolete very quickly.
Yeah, that curve is just accelerating. But I mean, talking about change, how do we build a country in South Africa that works for everybody?
Yeah, that's the $1,000,000 question, right? I think my hope, my dream is that a new guard steps forward. And it's not going to come from baby boomers. It's going to come from one of these new Generation Zs or millennial groups who are just had enough, irrespective of race and color. And they step forward and say, there's a better way to be. There's a better way of living. And that's it's got to be that kind of transformational. You can't replace one political party with another political party in the current gene pool. You have to refresh that gene pool, and it needs a lot of new blood. I've said this to death. I read widely, and I don't see any natural solutions from the current gene pool. Yes, there's some rays of sunshine, but you need that groundswell of leadership, and people want to believe. I'm a dog lover, and dogs love to be led. It's a pack mentality. Only one person can really be the leader, and in every house, your dog wants you to be the leader, and your dog wants you to discipline it. And I'm not saying it's about dogs, and I'm just saying you need some natural leadership because people naturally want to be led, and we can't all be leaders. And I'd like to see that happen. It's going to take a while. I think people have to get more disillusioned to want that change. I'm surprised it hasn't happened. In fact, a lot of people here talk about, this massive revolution that may or may not come in different parts of the world. I think that revolution has started, and people just don't realize. And it's these subtle things where you hear the rhetoric about, I don't mean to be political at all, but you hear the rhetoric about kill the bull, for example. That is, you're just slowly poisoning a nation when you do that. And they do that on purpose. It's a psychological action that takes place. I'd like to see a whole new gene pool come forward and say, we love this country enough to care, and we're not going to put up with this mediocrity. We're not going to have a single group of people, call it 100 families, dominate everything. We're just not going to do that. And I think that's good. I think if I'm going to jump to it now, because I know it's a question that's likely to come up, what do I think is going to happen in the next World Cup? Right? Now, I fear for that because, it is so important. Rugby is the bellwether for the attitude in South Africa. And in 2027, it's going to be tough. I'm hoping that Rusty and his team have got a strategy that isn't a 1-point quarterfinal, 1-point semifinal. I don't think I can live through that again. But I think they're reinventing themselves. I really do. I think they're reinventing themselves faster than the other nations in the World Cup. And the pressure to win the next World Cup is going to be beyond immense. It's going to be much tougher for the Bokke to win that away game because they carry the nation's hopes. And I'm hoping that a couple of other things are going to happen, that the reliability around what the Boks do on the field isn't the only way we can sort of see positive change in South Africa. There's so many other ways we can do that. And I don't know exactly what that is. It's a state of mind, but people need to want to do that. There's a famous joke. How many psychoanalysts does it take to change a light bulb? Do you know?
No.
Only one. But the light bulb must want to change. And I joke glibly about that, but South Africa must want to change. Everybody must want to change. everybody must want to go down a particular path. You can't have old factions, new factions, liberal factions, conservative factions, all fighting for their place in the sun. There's got to be a common groundswell. And that's actually what rugby's done tremendously, but it's not enough. It's too much of a burden because, God forbid, things go wrong. The depression will be massive, as we know, because the Springboks not allowed to lose. We all know that.
They won't. We just blindly believe.
Exactly. But just think about how important that is going to be, and how smart they're going to have to be, and how much resources they're going to have to throw at it, and how strong people are going to have to be mentally in that camp to make sure that they get there. I'm a big cyclist, and I follow I cycle myself a lot, and I follow all the big tours. And when you see the guys that are winning, they are 10% faster than the drug community used to be. That's how good they are. And if you want to win the Tour de France or the Vuelta a España or the Giro d'Italia, you have to be so much better than the next guy. And these guys are awesomely good. And that's what we have to do moving forward in all sports, but rugby particularly.
And so how do we, as the 10th province and South Africans abroad, how do you think we can contribute to help that happen? How do we make sure we support creating a country that works for everybody in South Africa?
Yeah, that's again another $1 million question. Thanks for that.
I'm getting wealthier by the second.
yes. Justinus, I think you've got to believe, and you've got to see early signs. And the good thing about supporting something like the Springbok group, right, is that you see the passion, and you know that you can see a lot of it. It's tangible. It's something you can touch. I think we've got to show a level of support. I think in different parts of the world, because I think in 2031 it's coming to the US.
Oh yeah,
and that's huge.
Yeah.
I think we've got to help with the narrative, and I'm flying now. I mean, I'm not sure what we've got to do, but we've got to help people understand that this is the most unbelievable sport to watch. You just got to understand it, and it's hard to learn a new sport, and it's hard for me sometimes to understand the rules. When there's a scrum or whatever it is, and the ref suddenly does something, I listen to, well, what happened there? So you imagine if you've never ever watched rugby before. Rugby's not small in America. Here in California, we have 7 professional rugby teams. A lot of ex-England players, ex-French players, all play rugby full-time in season here in California. I don't really know other parts of the US from a rugby perspective, but they're good. It's a club system that works. Something we kind of don't have in South Africa, but we have it in England, and you certainly have it in France. The club system is a great feeder for a national sport. And I think if they get that right here, you'll have America or the USA will compete. They did in 2015. I know because I went to watch them play the Bokke at the Olympic Stadium, and we beat them 74-0. But not that I remember.
Did you go to the Brighton match as well when we unfortunately lost to Japan?
Why did you have to bring that up?
It was the best thing that could have happened for so many reasons. Yes, so we were there. Myself, actually, the guy who from South Africa originally, but he was running Rolls-Royce at the time in England. And him and I went to Brighton to watch. And we actually sat behind 4 Japanese guys. And we watched this game unfold. And, it was Eddie Jones, right? He was the coach of
Japan.
I apologize for remembering all the stuff, but it is what it is. And I remember the joy of these four guys in front. And when they turned around, because they knew we were South African supporters, and when they turned around, they all had lanyards. They're wearing suits, very formal Japanese businessmen. They're wearing suits. They all had lanyards with little cards on them. And this was the organizing committee for the 2019 games in Japan. I think it was in 2019. Yes, it was.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And so this was 2015, and they were crying. And it was just something to see. From a personal perspective, no one would bet with me on the Springboks in the World Cup. And my phone never stopped ringing because every POM in England wanted to now bet me, knowing that the Springboks had lost the first game. And the bet was that South Africa would get further in the World Cup than England. And I won £1,200 because they got knocked out in the quarters and we got knocked out.
That's awesome.
Good there. Yeah.
And so the loss actually worked in your favor, made you some more money.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome, man. So where do you think you'll be watching the World Cup, hopefully final next year in Australia?
I won't be going to Australia. It's interesting. It's very, very expensive to travel to a World Cup. It doesn't matter what currency you're coming off. If somebody invites me, and I'm lucky I do get invited from time to time to be a guest, I will definitely go. But I'm unlikely to spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to go to watch them. Just as much as I would love to, it's just not a good use of my time and probably too expensive, too extravagant. I'd love to.
Maybe it's time to launch Tongg in Australia.
Yes. That's a good point. Yeah, we'll see. It started off as a hobby. It's becoming a mainstream business now, which is exciting. And you've got to support it as such. But it brings a smile to my face. And at the end of the day, when you see the delight of somebody eating biltong for the first time, it's something special.
Oh,
especially kids. Sure. Quite a few farmers came from South Africa. They married to American women. They've been here for a while. Their little kids are now eating droevorst as a snack. And the delight in their faces is just something special.
I love it, I'm sure. Well, thanks for your time, Brett. That was a great conversation. And it's always so refreshing and amazing to speak to successful South Africans all spread out through the world. And it's really amazing how we both have to adapt and stay connected to South Africa.
Absolutely. And look, let's have faith. I think there's a lot of good to come across all things in South Africa, and we just have to have faith and believe, because they certainly do on the field.
If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe and help us build the biggest community of successful South Africans abroad. So subscribe now. Thank you for listening.